justice. Whakarongo ake ai au ki te tangi a te manua te moa tui a. Tui ai runga, tui ai raro. Tui ai roto, tui ai waho. Tui a te muka tangata i tā kia mai ki Hawaii ki nui, Hawaii ki roa, Hawaii ki pāmāmao. Ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao. Ko te timatanga o te whakarunui ko te wehi tonu kia ihoa. E tā rahu pai tō te hunga katoa nāna e rā mahi. Kia mau te whakamoemiti ki tōna ingoa tapura. Ki tō tātou nei whare e tuāke nei me te papai hora nei. Tēnā koe, tēnā kōrua. E ngā tini mate o tātou kua ngaro atu nei ki te tirohanga kanohi. O ki atu koutou ki te wāhi a rātou mā, ko te wāhi e kia nei, ki te wāhi o a mātou mātua tūpuna. O ki atu, moe mai, moe mai. Kia tātou kua hui mai nei katoa, kei raru i te tuanui nei, o celebration. Nau mai hare mai, koutou katoa. Hei whakanui ake i te kaupapa, kua whakatākotoria, kei moe te aroaro o tō tātou kaihanga. Kei konei mātou, ki te hāpai, i te oranga o te whānau, nō reira, nau mai, tau tī mai, waiho au hara ki te taha, o wangawanga ki te taha, me aro tahi tātou ki te kaupapa, ko te oranga o te whānau tērā. Nō reira, nei rau, tēnei tangata no ngā puhi, e tūāke nei ki te mihi atu nei, nau mai, hare mai, kai nui tātou. Tū mai, we're going to have a karakia now. E te atua, whakarongo mai ki a mātou ki te nui ki a koe. Anei he whakamuimiti ki a koe mo tō aroha me tō awhina ki a mātou. Nō reira mana ki tia mai mātou, tia kina mai mātou i roto i te kaupapa o te rā, te mahi o te oranga mo te whānau. He atua, he atua. Tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā tātou katoa. Right now, I'd just like to welcome up to the stage the beautiful Leanne. Homai te paki paki, homai te paki paki.
Chanel. We'll keep Chanel on any time, won't we? That nice intro. Welcome everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's symposium, run through the Canterbury Family Violence Collaborative. I'm going to be your host this morning before we then switch over to Blair this afternoon as your host. So just want to do a little bit of housekeeping to start off with before we get into the main event. In the case of fire, you'll see there's 4 evacuation doors through there. If you head through there, out into the car park and go as far into the car park as you can. Toilets are out through these doors and straight through. The main toilet's there. Can we please ensure cell phones are turned off? If you aren't sure, could you please check now just before we have our first speaker come on? If you're a smoker, not to be judgmental, out here and down at the end of the driveway at the request of the centre, please. Just a wee bit of an outline for today. Hopefully you have the agenda in front of you. Most important things are we're going to have some keynote speakers this morning. Morning tea will be at approximately 10:15 and lunch will be at 12:45. And that will give you half an hour for networking before we head into workshops this afternoon, where you have the opportunity to go through those 3 workshops. A break again at 3:15 with closing around 4 o'clock. So really action-packed day, and I think we've got an amazing agenda on today. Before I do a wee bit of an introduction, I just want to thank some people for the massive amount of effort they've put into arranging today. So I want to thank Blair Williams from Rangatamariki Partnering for Outcomes, Shireen Hudson from the Canterbury Family Violence Collaborative, and Eileen Tefetu and Vicky Aitchison from our ISR team. Actually, I suppose I should have introduced myself before I did that, didn't I? So I'm Leanne McSkimming. I'm the Director for the Integrated Safety Response to Family Violence pilot here in Christchurch, of which many of you are either part of or have been involved in and working with. So today really provides us with an opportunity to come together and to build the capability across our wider family violence sector, or those that work with people who may be experiencing family violence. It's also an opportunity for us to network, to make new connections, and to actually have that opportunity to talk about the work we're doing and what's going on in our areas of practice. No one agency can change the trajectory of family violence. We're still one of the worst countries in the OECD, and I know it's something with the many people that are here today that none of us are proud of, and we all want to work to change, and that to me is a real positive. I think all of us working collectively and collaboratively will make that difference, and I know in Christchurch we are seen as leading the way in working collaboratively and collectively. ISA is one of the ways that we're doing that, with that initial Make Safe following crisis response. It is the work that's being done from our sector and from our agencies joining up has been amazing. Whilst we're seeing reports of family violence increasing, we're seeing the seriousness of offending decreasing, which is a real positive. The engagement from whānau, the engagement from victims, perpetrators in Tamariki has been significant. But I also want to acknowledge the work that is done outside of that, because that is hugely important. Everyone plays a part in this, and this is about how we join up, we build that wider support and sector. The homicide in the weekend is a stark reminder of why we're here, and that the work we do, why the work we do is so important. And, you know, that creates an opportunity for looking at actually, you know, what opportunities we have, how we can support wider. So it sort of brings home why we're here today. Some of the content you are going to hear today, some of the speakers will tell their stories, and that can be pretty challenging for you, for some people to hear. So if you need to just take some time to pop out, or if you want to have a little bit of a chat to your neighbour, that's okay. And we'd certainly encourage that. I'm going to get off the stage now because there's much more interesting people to talk than me. So I would like to introduce Jeremy, who's going to come and be our first keynote speaker today. Jeremy is part of the, he's an It's Not Okay champion, and he's going to come and tell us a little bit about his story, and there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. So if you can please put your hands together for Jeremy.
Can you hear me? Am I too loud? All right. Kia ora tātou, everybody. Tōku mihi tuatai ki a koe. Te menete ki te whakatau i a mātou I tēnei ata, tēnā koe. My full name is Patu Moana Jeremy Eparaima. I'm born and bred in the Horowhenua, from a large place called Foxton. I've been working for It's Not Okay campaign for coming up 7 years now. So I'm 53 now. But up until my mid-40s, early 40s, I was a perpetrator of domestic violence on multiple partners over the years, and 3 children from 2 of those relationships that were always also brought up through that world. What I started to do, and it has really started to evolve the work that I did. Initially, when I started this work, I was just mainly talking to groups of perpetrators, men's groups, guys that could identify with what you're about to hear. But it has evolved a lot where the likes of yourselves and agencies and everybody that's working with these families are wanting to get an understanding of it, because the reality is, if you've never walked in the shoes of someone who is a victim of domestic violence or a perpetrator, then you really have no idea what that world is like for them. If you have, then unfortunately you have a better understanding and a step up above some of your co-workers that won't understand what's going on. So my story is 2 parts today. So the first one is a journey to perpetration, is what it's called. And life is a journey, which is why I use the word journey all the time. And the word perpetrator, or what you hear of a perpetrator, a man, and I do say man, 96% of domestic violence is perpetrated by males, but it's certainly not just a single gender problem, particularly in this day and age now of LGBT and stuff like that. There's a lot of different dynamics going on. Thanks. So how does a man get so far removed from reality as to what's okay and what's not okay? How you bring up a family, how you treat your partners. And a lot of it is guided, I guess is the word, by their role models as children, the people they hang out with, what they see other people doing, what becomes the normal, and what becomes normal in my life may be completely different from a lot of other people in the room. Yeah, what is normal? You know? So to have an understanding of that. But I do have to stand up right now and right from the beginning, and I'll reiterate it all the way through, that domestic violence is a choice. I've been doing this work now for, as I said, 7 years. I've spoken to a lot of men over that time, and some of them, pardon me, have had some horrific stuff happen in their lives as children, but they've never gone on to perpetrate violence. So it does come down to a choice, but I will say an uneducated choice. Some of us men or perpetrators are given, the way I can best describe it, as half a toolkit to start life with, to start your adult life with. And it's quite funny, men, we're notoriously bad for it. We won't look after our own health or anything like that, our well-being, spiritual well-being, anything like that. But when it comes to our jobs and stuff like that, we look after ourselves pretty well. So say if I'm a builder and I've got a shit hammer, then I'll go out and get a good hammer. I've got just about every 18-volt tool attachment that I can get to fit, so now I don't have to plug in my circular saw when I do work. I'll do everything that I can to make my job easier. But we don't do that with our lives. We don't go out and get the tools as readily as we do. Sometimes it's because no one comes into our life to give us that intervention, to lead us on a journey. And sometimes it's because we don't choose to get to that place ourselves. And the guys and the people that you work with in the circles that you work with, particularly a few police officers I saw in the audience here, you continue to go back to those same houses every week. And it's because they're not getting the tools or the help that they need. So I don't believe for a lot of the men out there that you're dealing with, or the families that you're dealing with, that incarceration is what they need. What they need is to be able to fill their toolkit and get the life skills and the skills that they need to operate properly in how to run a family and what's normal and what's not. So first of all, and I'm going to condense about 25 years of crap into 45 minutes. So I'm going to skim through it pretty quickly. And as far as, I guess, adult perpetration of what men are doing to their families, the majority of you will have a fair idea because you're working with it. But I'd like to introduce you to a 19-year-old boy who had just finished a prestigious boys' boarding school and moved across to Whanganui. Now, after 4 years at a boys' boarding school, got into a relationship pretty quickly with a woman who was a little bit older than me and had a 2-year-old daughter. Now, my belief system and my value system was well and truly instilled in me at 19 years old. I have a belief of how things work, how this world runs, how families work, and everything like that. And I took that into my relationships. And this thing about domestic violence is, it doesn't show its face straight away. It's a gradual step. When you start that relationship, there's the honeymoon period where everything's really cool. And for reality, for somebody that's carrying stuff like I was, you suck that person into loving you, and they fall in love with that person, the nice guy, the guy who's telling them they're beautiful all the time, or giving them flowers and stuff every once in a while, and getting them into a relationship with you. You let stuff slide that you won't a little bit later on in the relationship. And once you've got them, then that's when things start to change. Now, there's some myths and beliefs well and truly in the minds of perpetrators as well. And for me, when I first started, I was mainly a verbal abuser. And I thought that I was okay. I thought the wankers were the guys that hit their woman and kids. And so I just yelled and screamed at them. So I'm okay, because words don't hurt, right? Someone going to correct me? So I have 2 children from that first relationship. One's 33 now, and the other one's 28. And it's what I used to say that they remember. That's what they've carried all their life. The bruises from the hidings, which eventually came, are long healed. But it's what I used to speak into them that has left the scars. So my tongue has done more damage in this world than my fists ever did. And I never would have believed that. So don't minimise the fact that it's only verbal abuse going on in these families. And even your victims are going to minimise the fact that, oh, well, at least he doesn't hit me. Know that there's a whole lot of damage being done with words. I'm not an overly religious person, but there's a scripture that says that the tongue is mightier than the sword. And I believe that. I've seen it. I know now in my own kids the stuff that they're carrying because of what I used to speak into them. But as I said, it doesn't start off straight away. But once you get into that role, and as a perpetrator of domestic violence, and if you'd asked me this right at the beginning, even when I first started this journey, whether I believed I was a control freak or that I wanted power and control in my relationship, I wouldn't have thought that of myself. I wouldn't have looked at myself and gone, I'm just consciously trying to make sure that I'm in control all the time. And this is a hard thing to understand too, is that there's not conscious thoughts going on all the time, like I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and then I'll get this result and stuff like that. It's just how it plays out. So it'll start off verbally. And I can almost guarantee you that in every relationship, this verbal stuff at some stage is going to go to the next level. And again, it's about that power and control. So I used to be able to get quite good control in my home by yelling and screaming, by being right up in her space, so inches away, intimidation, standing over her, and I would get the desired result. She would quieten down, or she would not argue back. But after a little while, your partners, when you're in this world, they start to get used to you and they know that you're full of crap as far as the threats and everything go. And from the perpetrator's point of view, they're starting to stand up to you. So what do I do now to get some more control? And the way that I used to rage, and I call it rage, I went from talking nice and quietly like this to something just pissing me off enough to make me start yelling and screaming. There was no gradual build-up of anger. It was instant defense mechanism or instant attack. And I used to get right up in her space, as I said. And every once in a while she'd push me away, or she'd even punch me in the face. And I'd laugh it off. But one particular night she must have got me with a fairly good shot, and I reacted. And again, when you're in this world as a perpetrator, I'm living in a world of minimisation, denial, justification. It's always someone else's fault, blame. If you didn't say that, if you didn't do this, this wouldn't have happened. So all this is going on. And again, can't explain it, but not consciously. You're not sitting there thinking, oh yeah, but that's how you justify within your head later on. Or you start to argue that point. So this particular night, I ended up grabbing her by the throat and holding her up against the wall. And it was her fault. She was hitting me. Stop hitting me, and I'll let you down. And I got the desired result. She quietened down pretty quickly, so I put her down. Now, after every episode, and you can't call it an incident, what you have to look at is this holistically. So when you come in to connection with a family or something like that, it's not one incident you're dealing with. It's an episode of stuff, so you need to look at the whole episodes. You can't, who watches Game of Thrones? Yep. So, 7 seasons now. You can buy the box set. So if you picked up that box set of Game of Thrones and then picked out one CD from season 3, episode 5, would you get the whole gist of that story from that one DVD? No. So you need to look at the whole picture. So after incidents like that, for most guys, and I'll say most, there's a element comes in of remorse straight away. And I fed her a line that night that every victim of domestic violence gets to hear over and over again. What's that one? Yep, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again. What a load of crap. At least I got divinely touched that night, or I actually went out and started to make change, and even if I started to make change, it doesn't just stop like that. And even in my head, I've just become a wanker. I've hit. I've now overstepped the mark. But again, not consciously, but hard to explain. But I got the desired result. So the power and control guy starts to think, well, okay. So over 16 years in that relationship. And over that 16 years, I progressed to everything imaginable and unimaginable in some homes. So next was pushing and slapping with my right hand because I'm left-handed. So I can hit harder than that. There's my little justification. Right hand jabs, left hand jabs, full out man punches, kicking, spitting. And when you're that power and control person, the easiest way to get control over to someone is to break them, to take away their fight, or to try and take away their fight. And again, I wasn't consciously thinking that in my head. But when I look back at my actions now, it's exactly what I was doing. I used to get kicked out all the time. And what you become when you're that person, and let's take away some stereotypes right from the beginning. So this just doesn't happen in Māori and Pacific Island homes of lower socioeconomic areas. I never used to drink alcohol and smoke pot all day and be on the dole. I completed an apprenticeship at the railways in Wanganui, and then they shut all the workshops, so I went straight into retail management, worked for a company called Group Rentals. My career up until I started this was I've been the manager of Mitre 10 in Levin, Mitre 10 Foxton, and New World Foxton. So always leadership roles, captains of a lot of my rugby teams. And to the outside world, I was an all-time good guy. But I had a public persona and had a persona behind closed doors. And they were two totally different people. And the longer you're in this world, the better you get at hiding it. So my kids got the message before they went to school some mornings that this wasn't the topic of their morning talk and things like that. And after getting kicked out all the time, and again, hard to explain, but what the college had given me was a background in sports, and I was good at sports. And it was sporting field back in the early 80s was where I could let go of a lot of my aggression and get away with it. So I say this tongue in cheek, but I used to play rugby when it was real rugby. When you ruck the shit out of everyone. My job as an open side flanker was to try and hurt the opposition's number 10. And the team talk at the beginning of the game was 1 in and all in. And that normally happened in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the game, and then you settled down and finished it off playing the game. I went on to represent Whanganui at full representative level in rugby, sevens, softball, touch. So I became quite well known in the community because of the sporting fields. And like I said, to them, an all-time good guy, leading all the songs at the parties, staying out late, hanging around with my mates. And as an adult, every decision that I made put me first. And completely honest with you, me first, then my sports, then my mates, and then my family. Completely arse about face, but that's how it used to be. So we become master manipulators. And we'll manipulate whoever we come in front of us. So some of you social workers, anybody that comes in, police, Mr. Nice, calm guy. So my partner would sometimes ring the police if I knew the police were coming, instant calm down. Put the cupboard back up in place and calm right down. So by the time they got there, I'm nice and calm. Now I've just been going off for about 45 minutes to an hour, intimidating, hitting. Once the police gets there, sometimes my partner would take the opportunity to have her say. So I'm nice and calm and she's yelling and screaming. And I'd manipulate those officers. Mate, I've just come home and I've walked into that. I'm trying to sit and eat my tea. It's cold, but, you know. And she's yelling and screaming and calling me every name under the sun. And these guys sometimes would listen to me. And again, a lot of the times that I ran into them in that stage, and again, I'm talking about policing in the 1980s, so it's a lot different to what they do nowadays. All they did was remove one party for the night. So I'd get dropped off at a mate's place or something like that, and then back the following day. So my own 2 children came along in this relationship. And the kids get dragged into this world too. And again, another myth that's alive and well with perpetrators is they'll put the kids in the bedroom while I'm about to do this stuff out in the lounge because I'm looking after them doing that. Total myth. You know, there's some kids cowering in a bedroom, hearing something going on, hearing their mother getting yelled and screamed at and hit, wondering what the hell was going on out in that room. where the mum's going to be standing up when they come out. And when they got a little bit older, they tried to get between me and their mother sometimes. So they'd get a whack and they'd get put into their bedroom physically and told to stay there. And that went on for 16 years, and like I said, it progresses. So it starts off maybe once a month, then it's once a fortnight, then it's once a week, then it's every second night, and it becomes normal to your kids. I've been contracted by New Zealand Police for the last 3 years, so I go into the training college at Porirua and speak to all recruit wings around the mindsets of perpetrators. But I've also done some district training, and it was a senior sergeant that I spoke to who'd been over 20 years service in the police, and he said to me, the scariest part is when you go into a house and there's kids in there and there's a whole lot of stuff going on. There's throwing, there's hitting, there's yelling and screaming still going on, and there's kids in there and they're cowering in the corner. He goes, but what's worse is when you go in there and all that's going on and there's two kids still just sitting on the PlayStation, completely unaffected by what's going on around them, because it's normal. Yeah? So, in my head, I'm the manager of a store in Wanganui. I'm a top sportsman. I pay a mortgage. I pay taxes. I'm an upstanding citizen. Regardless of what I was doing at home, because I wasn't doing anything wrong. It was normal. After getting kicked out all the time, one night I just went, bugger this. I'm sick of being the ogre here all the time. So it was me that sort of ended the relationship, not my partner. She'd been putting up with all that stuff for years and years. And this is what you're going to strike all the time too. And if you think this question, if you think, why do women stay? Or if you ask yourself that all the time, then you need to get out of the profession you're in. Because if you have no understanding of why women can get trapped or why they stay, there's a whole lot of reasons behind it. Every once in a while, I'll give her a glimpse of the fella that she fell in love with. I'll threaten her. You can leave, but you're not taking the kids. She's got no money. She's got nowhere to go. I've isolated her from her family. All those types of things come into play. So don't ever put it on a victim. But I'd had enough of being kicked out of my own home. So I left, packed a bag and left, hung around in Wanganui for a little while, but then I moved back down to Foxton from where I'm from, straight into another relationship. So 10 years after my last child, along comes another one pretty quickly. Now that girl didn't last very long with me because she'd never experienced anything like me. So we'd gone into past honeymoon period. I'm just starting to get a bit vocal in this relationship, and she said to me that she wanted to complete her degree in accounting. I said, that's a good idea. I'm the manager of Mitre 10 Foxton at that stage. And she said, I'd like to go to the Southern Institute of Technology in Invercargill to do that because there's zero fees. Another good idea. Okay, cool. I was affluent enough to be able to fly down whenever I wanted to see my son. So that's no problem. You can go for 12 months. And she left and went down. About 2 weeks later, I got the proverbial Dear John letter saying that she was getting scared of me, and that's, my yelling and stuff was starting to scare her, and she didn't want to bring her son up in that world. At the time, bloody lying bitch told me she was going down. And again, I don't know how to explain this, but whenever my partner my wife, who she became in the first relationship, used to call the police or call a close friend of mine to come and take me away. And what this girl did, they betrayed me. You're supposed to be in relationships through good and bad. Whenever I get bad, I get kicked out. So again, just how my head was operating at the time. I was being betrayed. After that girl left, I pretty much went into relationships with this mindset that I wonder how long this chick will last, and that if you can't handle the heat in my kitchen, then bugger off. And they kept buggering off. And I didn't realise at that stage in my life that it was me and my behaviour that was forcing everybody out of my life. So by the time I'm probably about 24, I'm in the full throes, so I'm physical. The psychological stuff never goes away. You just start the argument with the psychological stuff. If that doesn't work, then the physical stuff steps in. And it just progressively gets worse and worse. And for want of a word, you perfect it as a perpetrator. You know exactly what to say. You know exactly what to do to hurt the most. You know exactly how far to push before the police get called. You're in control. And what I'm doing is okay. What I'm doing is happening in every other home. That's my belief. Maybe not to the extent of my place. Maybe worse in some places. Maybe less. So how does a guy, a 19-year-old, get to a place where he believes that this is how life runs? So now I'll introduce you to a 5-year-old boy who I don't have many memories. I have a few flashes of something prior to 5 years old to this particular day that I'm about to speak about, but nothing, no days at the beach, no family outings, anything like that. There's no memories of it. But I came home from school one day and my dad was gone. My dad was my taha Māori. My mum was of Scottish and Irish descent. Some people say the mixture of those cultures was half the problem. But my dad was perpetrating domestic violence. I have an older sister and a younger sister, and I remember being in the bedroom with my cousins or just us sometimes, and the parties were going on, the guitars are going, everyone's singing, drinking, really good time. Everything's really happy, and then all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. And there's yelling and screaming and crashing, and someone's getting a hiding. And like I said, the first few times that happened, you're cowering in the bedroom. Shit, you know, what's going on? When you have a few parties, if you're at the party house and everybody comes back to your place all the time, after a few weeks, you're over by the door peeking out to see who's getting a crack. And you start to become used to it. So you know when the party starts, you start to expect that at some stage that night, it'll go a bit ugly. That's how it was. And the thing about this world of domestic violence, you know, my own children up through what I've done and what my dad was doing, and my mum said to me that the day that I got home, she told me a whole lot of stuff about my dad that a 5-year-old boy probably didn't need to hear. That he'd been giving me a lot of hidings because I was the only boy, and that I'd been booted across the room and stuff like that, and I honestly don't recall that stuff. That he was an arsehole, and she just got rid of him. But I loved my dad. And that's the thing about kids that get stuck in this world. They love you unconditionally. And you can do some pretty horrific stuff to them. And yeah, when they get a little bit older or they become adults, they can look back and think, no. But when they're kids, they love you, regardless of what you do to them. So my dad was gone. Over the next few months, there was a procession of uncles. Whenever my mum came home from the pub on a Friday or Saturday night, on the next morning there was a strange man in the house, and some of them would give you a handful of coins to get rid of you, and some would just walk in and out of the house. About 6 months later, along came John, and John was to become our stepdad. Blended families is what they call it nowadays. So statistically, 3 in 5 families in New Zealand are now blended in some way. And what happens in this is it's two adults that meet and fall in love. And then they want to move in together. And kids just have to cope. So now I have a new dad, or I have new brothers and sisters. Get on with it. And in a lot of times, this is where trouble starts. And for me and my two sisters, John didn't want anything to do with us. We weren't his kids. He only wanted a relationship with my mum. And so from 5 years old to 10 years old, my days pretty much went like this every day. I'm talking weekends, school holidays, whatever. We got up in the morning, we had breakfast, we went back to our bedroom. We left our bedroom to go to school. We came back from school and we went to our bedroom. We came out of our bedroom to have tea and do the dishes, and then back to your bedroom. Out of your bedroom to have a wash and go to the toilet, back to your bedroom. And I'm talking 1970 when I was 5, so no PlayStations, no electronic games or anything to amuse your mind, just your imagination, or in my case, lack of it. My two sisters to this day, awesome freehand artists. My sisters would go back to their rooms and draw pictures and read books, but it wasn't in me. And I'd have probably been diagnosed ADHD nowadays, because I could not sit still in my room. And I would lie on my bed with my feet on the wall and go dunk, 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 dunk. Draw on the wallpaper, tear a bit off so I had somewhere else to draw. Asked to go to the toilet about 10 times. And that was to be considered naughty. Now, John was a psychological abuser. Never ever touched me physically or my sisters. But what John would do would make my mum do it. And he would send my mum in. And the man that I told you about, the 19-year-old that raged, that yelled and screamed and got right up in your face. And I used to say, even when I started this work, I was out of control. Once I got past that point of no return, I've looked back and I know, even though I used to say that, there's an element of calculation in everything that I was doing. My ex-wife was a registered nurse at Wanganui Base Hospital. So she never ever went to work with a black eye or a fat lip. So the hitting that was done was around the torso and the legs. And this is when I'm supposedly out of control. So, you know. But my mum, that was me. That's where I learnt that behaviour. My mum would come down the hallway, she's already yelling and screaming. She'd bring a weapon with her, the jug cord, the vacuum cleaner pipe, or in the end there was pieces of wood that were cut for me, like canes. And she would just burst into my room and start raining down. And I remember begging her to stop sometimes, but she's not hearing me. She's just raining down, you little bastard, why can't you sit still? Why don't you always my fault. So I learnt from a real young age to curl up in a ball on the bed with my arm up over my head and just protect my head. And she would keep going until she ran out of puff. And then she'd just leave the room. And ADHD, or whatever you want to call it, some people just said a boy. bored. My mum ended up in my room most nights for one reason or another, and it started to become normal to me. And I didn't want to bring it on or anything like that, but when I got home from school, I sort of knew by the end of the night I was going to get a crack for something. And it wasn't just never a crack, one hit. She used to just nut at me. And it became normal. So by the time I'm 10, Mum's hidings aren't hurting anymore. So whenever she came into the room with whatever she had in her hand, she might get one whacking. And then I'd take off her whatever she had in her hand, and I'd start beating her with it. And I'd smash her out of my room. Get out, get out. And I'd take whatever I had in my hand and I'd throw it into the lounge, because John used to sit in this corner of the lounge the whole time. I remember the smell when I was a kid, never connected it. John was an alcoholic. John was drunk all the time, but he got fed there, hardly ever moved. And I told him what little boys did, you know, like do. You wait, one day my dad's going to come back and smash your fucking face in. And I had a thought in my head at 10 years old that I can't wait till I'm big enough. I'm going to get you. I'm going to kill you. And so a 10-year-old boy is sitting in his room plotting how he can kill his stepfather. Now, after a particularly nasty hiding one night from my mum with the jug cord, she decided that she'd had enough of me. So she was going to get rid of me and send me off to social welfare, what it used to be called then, now Orama Tamariki. But my biological dad had been away for the whole 5 years and had never had any contact with me. He'd been told to stay away by my mum, and he'd done what he was told. But prior to her making the call to social welfare, she got hold of my dad and said, "Do you want to take this kid? I'm over him." I remember her words. "I'm sick of him. He's out of control. I don't want him here anymore." Now, the only memories I had of my dad were what my mum had told me about him. So there was no fucking way I wanted to go and live with him. I'm going to get a hiding all the time. But my mum made an agreement with my dad, and I turned up the first time I met my dad again and went to his house for a weekend. And he lived out at Foxton Beach. I got there with my plastic bag of clothes, and this normalisation that I talk about was well and truly set in my life when I look back now. I got to his place. He introduced me to his partner and said, "Oh, there's your bedroom over there. Boy, put your bag in there." So I went in and put my plastic bag down on the floor, and then I sat on the bed. I'd been in there for about a quarter of an hour, and Dad came in and goes, "What are you up to?" "Sitting." "Come out and watch TV." The normalisation was you stay in your bedroom. Now, I've had some pretty good nights in my life, a whole lot more to come, hopefully. But that night still rates right up there. I was allowed to watch TV, what I wanted to watch. Chippies and lemonade. The next morning, 2 of my cousins turned up, and if you're not unfamiliar with where Foxton is, it's right on the mouth of the Manawatu River. My dad's house was about 50 metres away from the river. So the next day we fished all day and swam. Sunday we went out to the marae and I ran around with all my cousins. Had an awesome weekend. Come Sunday night, I got to go back to Levin. So from about Wednesday on, every week from then on, for about 3 or 4 weeks, "Dad, can I come to your place? Dad, can I come to your place?" And my mum was happy to get rid of me as often as she could. So, yep, you can bring your father. Now, us men, particularly us Māori men, we got this time frame problem sometimes. And my dad would say, "I'll be there after lunch." To me, after lunch was 12:30. Sometimes he'd roll in about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. So I'd be sitting waiting for 4 or 5 hours with my plastic bag. But I got to go away. Now, my older sister remembered a lot more about my dad than me. And they never, and I'm not saying they liked being in their room, but they certainly didn't get the grief that I did all the time. And they never connected with my dad at the time. So that's when I first started at 10 years old, starting to make decisions that were about Jeremy. Oh, well, I'm going. I tried to tell my sisters I was having an awesome weekend. You know, you should just come. You know, when Dad comes over, see if you can come. But they never reconnected with my dad at that time, so it was me. I'm off. And when that night came when Mum said, you know, luckily for me, from what I've heard about, and don't take this the wrong way, what I'm a tamariki workers, but what I've heard about SIFS homes, pretty lucky my dad said yes. So I went to live with him. And I had 2 years of pretty normal childhood. I was allowed, had a few chores to do after school, but I was allowed to play with my mates. Spent all summer swimming and surfing at the beach, fishing. I saw my sisters about twice. Over that time period, I had a couple of tangies. And that was it. I never went back to that house and live in. I didn't want to go back there. Come college year, and my mum wanted me back. For a couple of reasons. One was the benefit. And she'd never relinquished custody of me. And the other one was at that stage in the Nomads were just getting established in Foxton. And all the founding members of the Nomads were all my cousins. Grew up with them all. So I probably would have ended up maybe mixed up in that world. But my mum wanted me back. No way, Dad. I don't want to go there, you know. I've had 2 years of freedom. I don't want to go back. What can I do? He said, there's nothing I can do, son. She's got custody. You're going to have to go back. I said, man, there's got to be something. Come on. He goes, oh, well, what about boarding school? I went, yeah, I'll go to boarding school. What's boarding school? You live there. Yep. Anything's better than home. Now, I was brought up Māori. I always perceived myself as Māori as a kid. And at that stage in my life, the fairness of my skin had never come into play. But I got sent across to a Māori boys' college in Hawke's Bay. And the day I got there, I was a honky and a maggot. And what are you doing here? Anybody had a boarding school education in the room? Yep. Now you got a fair idea about what I'm about to speak about and how those institutes run differently to day schools. And it's a little bit like domestic violence. The cycle continues all the time. Every year, the third formers, you're just a turd. What they had at this particular college where I went to was fags. And a fag was make my bed, clean my rugby boots, find me a cigarette, give me your meal. And you could not disobey anybody in a form above you, even if their little fourth former was up to your shoulder. You had to do what you were told. And it was instilled into you pretty quickly to not narc. You don't tell about what goes on. The boys that used to tell got such a hard time. And again, adaptability, whatever you want to call it, I settled into that life. This is how it is. But I had one difference. Attitude, whatever you want to call it, that's what teachers had started calling it, attitude. Make my bed, Eparaima. Fuck, I'm not making your bed. What did you say? I'm not making your bed. Come over here then, put your head down. And that's what you had to do. And you'd walk over in front of them with your hands behind your back or whatever, put your head down and they'd smack you in the head, one punch. Now, because of the way Mum used to do things, one punch in the head was nothing. I'm taking that one punch. I ain't making your bed. Eparaima, can you? No. And I settled into that lifestyle. To start off with 5 or 6 punches in the head a day. 2 or 3 because I was white from the bullies. And 2 or 3 because I wouldn't do as I was asked. And the thing about boarding school is you don't get away at 3 o'clock. So if someone's in your face, they're in your face 24/7 if they want to be. So after 2 or 3 months of that, they started to leave me alone as far as asking me to do jobs. Because they were only going to hurt their hand on my head. and there was boys that would do as they were asked. So I was just dealing with the bullies, and I could cope with that pretty well. And again, this is how this part of this world runs. This is how it is. This is the normality of this place. I'd settled into it. The particular school that I was at was about the first 15, about the rugby. And the school system back then was School C and UE. So we had third year sixths having their 20ths at school so they could stay and play that first 15. And the point I'm alluding to there is at that age they were mean. When you came in at 13, 12 and 13, these guys were mean. The whole school system was set up like if it was bull rush, it was third and fourth form against fifth, sixth and seventh. You just, as a small, younger person, got smashed. In about March that year, a sixth former, our dormitories were set up as houses, not forms. So you had seventh formers to third formers sleeping in sleeping quarters. A sixth former and a first 15 player in my dorm one night started to sexually assault me. And I didn't know what the fuck to do with that. I didn't want to tell anyone. Didn't want my mates to find out. Didn't want my dad to find out. Didn't want anyone to find out. It was being instilled in me to shut my mouth too at that place, to not narc. And I couldn't get away from this fella, so it was happening most nights. And it went right up until the August school holidays. And by then I just had enough. Whatever you want to call it, dark place, whatever, you know, those cliches or whatever, but I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be sad. And all that happened during the day was the anxiety levels just got higher and higher and higher, the closer and closer it got to lights out. And I just had enough. So I decided to go home and try and be the best kid. I had to go back to live in. My dad had moved away again for a little while. And I went back to that room and I tried to be the best kid. And I started lying to my mum after 2 or 3 days that I'm homesick, Mum. I promise I'll be good. Please, can I go to college down here? You know, I miss home and stuff. Now, my mum had made my dad financially viable for boarding school, seeing it was his idea. So I got put on the phone to my dad and I told him the same bullshit. That I miss whānau and everything. Dad, you know, I just want to come home. I'm homesick. Now, there was a thing alive and well, and it's still alive and well in some homes to this day, but whatever adverse thing that happened to a young boy when he was growing up would make a man out of you. That's how my dad used to think. And so me just being homesick was not a good enough reason to not go back. And he said, well, I've already paid up for the whole year, boy, so you're going back. That night I hung up the phone. About 20 minutes later, it was the first night that I nutted off. But what I had was a nervous breakdown. And I started smashing up my mum in the house and everything like that, and she couldn't control me. She couldn't stop me, so she called the police. And again, I remember the words, you know, get him out of here. He's fucking mental. Look at him. Look what he's done to my house. I don't want him in here anymore. Get him out. These guys picked me up. Since I've been working with police, they helped me into the back of their squad car. Took them a little bit of an effort. But I got taken to a place south of Levin. It's shut now, but it was called Kimberley Hospital, which was a hospital for the criminally insane and intellectually handicapped, and dropped off to a guy in a white coat that I can describe the place, the room that I got taken into if you've seen One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And yeah, there was fellas rocking and making all sorts of noises, and Down syndrome kids, and they were being friendly, but they were coming up to me to welcome me, and they were grabbing me, and I got scared, so I just backed up against the wall, and anybody who got within arm's reach got a punch in the face. And I got taken out of that room by 2 male nurses and put into a room by myself because I was causing trouble. I was there for 3 days. The only person I saw for 1 hour a day was a woman asking me stupid bloody questions. Psychologist. And the thing about, you know, as a kid when you're growing up through this world is what you get robbed of is trust. And I'd started to not trust big people. Didn't have too much time for their beliefs, you know, or I didn't trust them. I had no connection with this woman, so there was no way I was going to tell her. One half of my brain is don't knock, because the boys will find out. And the other half was I'm not telling you anything. After 3 days, I had to go out what I'll call general population for meals. I'm over this place. So I spilled my guts to this woman just to get out of the place. Well, this is what's happening to me at college. Can I go now? So she called my parents in, spoke to my mum and dad about stuff. And as much as I didn't want to talk to her once I'd unloaded a bit, I thought to myself, oh, well, at least now I won't have to go back. But that's not how my dad thought about things. So he picked me up and said, we're going to go and sort this out, boy, we're going up that school. It's about a 3-hour drive. After about an hour and a half, he told me to shut up. Because I'm going, Dad, I don't want to go back there, you know, can we just turn around? And it wasn't for my own well-being, I'm going to be a narc. But we got there, and it was still a second week of the holidays, and I had to sit in the principal's office with my dad beside me, and the principal wanted to know in detail what was happening, what he was doing to me, what I was having to do, where he was doing it, and I had to spit all that in front of my dad. Now, you've probably worked out my dad wasn't an overly cuddly fella, but the principal gave me an assurance that if have an extra week off, and when you get back, that boy won't be here. Not the answer I wanted to hear. The answer I wanted was, you don't have to come back, but I'll take that one. So I got out into the car park, and I got a couple of pats on my head from my dad. You be right now, boy? Yep. So I went and had my extra week off, came back, walked past that cubicle, mattress folded up, drawers open. He's gone. All right. I hope none of the boys know I knocked. 2 weeks later, I came down on the afternoon after school and walked past the cubicle, and the bed was made. And there was clothes in the drawer. I flicked open the drawer. And my first thought was, there's a new boy, because there was boys coming in and out of the college all the time. One of the other traditions was when you lined up for meals, third formers were always last into the kitchen. So by the time I got into the dining room, everybody was pretty well seated, and the first 15 used to have a table up top. As I walked in through the door, I looked up there, and he was there. He'd been given a 2-week suspension for what he'd been doing, and he was back. And his eyes locked on me as soon as I walked in the door. And whatever had lifted off me, whatever you want to call it or anything, came crashing right back in then. And my gut started to churn. I felt sick. I didn't want to eat, so I just put my head down and I filed past all the food and straight out the other door of the kitchen, and I ran down to the front of the school to the rugby grounds. And I wasn't sad and I wasn't scared, but I was angry, and I was screaming at the top of my voice, just absolutely yelling. And I made a decision that night, which would be one of the worst decisions I ever made in my life. And it was that I'll never fucking ask for help again. My parents made me come back here. This principal let me down. Fuck you, big people. I'm going to look after myself from now on. And that's where it started. So I was quite a smart aleck as a kid. Quite clever. So I started to use my tongue to defend myself against bullies. So I'd pick up their big ears or their buck teeth or whatever and give it to them in a rhyme and stuff like that. So I started to use my tongue to defend myself. It took that guy about 2 nights to corner me again. And it started again. And this time I just shut my mouth. And it went on until the end of the year. And he left. And that's when it finished. But I'd survived third form year. I've now got some rights in the place. And like I said, it's like domestic violence. So now I'm a fourth former. But I went on to do 4 years at the college. And by the time I was a sixth former, I'd assimilated right into the culture of the school. I had young fellas running around after me, punching them in the head, making them find me cigarettes and things. And I left that place mixed up emotionally, mixed up sexually, angry, revengeful. I'm still going to kill John. It's always been in the back of my head. I'm not big enough yet. My dad was quite a short, stocky Māori fella. John was another Māori man, but about 6'4" and over 100 kgs. So a little bit of growing to do yet. But I'm still going to get him at some stage. And that was an 18-year-old that turned up in Whanganui, ready to start a relationship with a set of beliefs and values well instilled in me. That if you want to get what you want in life, you yell and scream to start off with. And if that don't work, then you hit. And that was the guy that started. Now, when I first got there also, because of what had happened to me at college, I also groomed and sexually assaulted a young girl. So now I also have a label. And the thing about the majority of the perpetrators that you're going to work with is that they're holding on to stuff. And they may have held on to it all their lives. And it's secret stuff to them. Stuff like that. You know? They say statistically 1 in 3 women will have some form of sexual assault in their lives or be assaulted by their partners. I'd say 2 in 5 men. A lot of the times when I talk and I particularly bring up that point, men come up to me afterwards and go, yeah, that happened to me. But it's a hard conversation to start for men. But that was the guy that started life off and worked right up until 45. Doing what I thought was normal. And the thing about change in someone's life, it's about timing. And I can't categorically say that if someone else had intervened in my life at 23, 24, they wouldn't have got told to piss off, mind their own business. It's none of your business. A few of my neighbours did over the years. There's a couple of people in the room who were part of a family that tried to help and intervene in my family back in Wanganui. I wasn't ready. So it's about timing, and it's not your timing, it's my timing. And it might be the 30th time you speak to me. So that's the journey to perpetration. That's how a guy gets to a place where what he thinks he's doing is normal. There's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. This is all happening, you know. This is happening in every household just about. And the reality is, in your street, if there was a family that seemed to be goody goods, they were the strange ones. So that's my journey thus far. We're going to break now for I think, a cup of tea and a bit of chat. And then afterwards I'm going to just carry on and I'm going to give you the most important part of my story, which was what led me to change and the belief in myself that I could change. So thanks very much for listening so far.
Wow, I don't quite know what to say, so we might just break. So 10:15, amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. So if we can break now for 15 minutes, and when we come back, Jeremy's going to tell the second part of his story. So if we can keep to time, just one thing I got to say is you're not allowed any open cups of tea or food in here. Bottled water's okay, so if you just make sure you have that before you come back in. Thanks very much.